Hello, Thrivers. Today, I want to talk about 3 ways that covert narcissists wind up using manipulation to exploit. Okay. And I've been focusing a lot on the covert narcissist recently because I feel like the manipulation that comes from a covert narcissist can fly so under the radar that you can wind up not even realizing that you are falling victim to this type of manipulation. For example, I have had clients that tell me, Michele, by the end of our relationship, I was doing everything from financial to emotional to everything in the house. And the other person was doing nothing. And I didn't even realize that through the years, I was just taking on so much. I didn't even realize I was being exploited and I was giving everything and I was getting nothing in return. Okay. And a lot of that happens when people don't understand how under the radar this manipulation is. So let's shine some light in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about 3 ways they do this. If any of these are familiar to you, let me know in the comments below. And if I'm missing one, let me know as well. And then the second half of the video, I'm going to talk about what you can do to break out of this kind of manipulation. So that being said, that's where narcissistic abuse meets complex PTSD recovery. If you're only interested in learning about the narcissist, focus on the beginning of this video. If you're interested in breaking free and getting unstuck and empowering yourself, then make sure you watch until the end because that's where I'm going to give you some tips and resources. So let's dive in. For those that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a life and relationship coach. I specialize in helping people overcome narcissistic abuse, complex PTSD, and childhood trauma. I'm the founder of the Thriver School of Transformation, which is an interactive monthly membership where we meet live on Zoom. And everything I talk about on my channel, we work through together. So if that's something you feel you can benefit from, I will leave the link here for you to check out. So the first thing I wanted to do was really put up the definition of exploitation. And it is the act of selfishly taking advantage of someone in order to profit from them or otherwise benefit oneself. Or it can be defined as to use someone or something to achieve one's own purpose. And the last definition, and I feel like all 3 of them are important to really have a well-rounded view of what exploitation is, but this really holds true with covert narcissism, but it is the deliberate maltreatment, manipulation, or abuse of power and control over another person. And it comes in many forms, including slavery or being controlled by a person. Got that definition out there. Let's talk about one way that narcissists manipulate with the intent to exploit. And the first has to do with them complimenting others. Okay, now hear me out. Hear me out for a second because it's normal. It's normal to compliment other people. It's normal for people in your life to compliment other people. So let's kind of dive into what I'm really talking about. When there is a covert narcissist in the family dynamics, okay, let's say it's a parent, a covert narcissistic parent, they will compliment maybe your sibling, right? And point out what they like that your sibling did. And they will never see when you do the exact or more. Okay, so it's not just complimenting, it's the compliment to this person while denying any kind of recognition to you. Or they can use somebody outside of the immediate family. Like I knew one person that had a narcissistic parent that used this a lot. They would talk about their own sibling and say, well, my sister's kids are amazing. She says jump and they say how high. Okay. And what both people were trying to do, the manipulation they were trying to do was make you think that it is possible for someone to reach their expectations, right? Because they're giving that compliment, they're speaking highly of that person, which means they are capable of giving recognition. And it usually wakes up, especially in children, the desire to give more. Why? Because children need and deserve that validation from a parent. So they're doing more and they're like, oh, my cousins, jump, or they say how high when their mom says jump. So that means in order for me to get my mom's approval, or father's, right? Either one, in order for me to get their approval, I have to do everything they say when they say it, and go above and beyond. And I can't say no. And there's that manipulation, right? And anytime that you actually have a boundary, they will use that and be like, well, so and so does this. So and so does this. You do this. And they're always kind of lowering you in an effort to try to get you to jump higher. That's one way that they manipulate. And it works because you start thinking, well, my parent or my boss or my significant other has the ability to see someone, trying. There's something wrong with me. I'm lacking. It's my fault. They're not seeing good in me. And that's where it gets blurry and confusing. The next way that they manipulate to exploit in a covert way is through classical conditioning. We all experience classical conditioning as children, right? When you do good, you're rewarded. When you do bad, you're punished. Well, a covert narcissist will punish you in a way that makes you feel like you have to do more. For example, if there are 10 things on your list of things to do, and you do 9 of them, the covert narcissist will focus on the one thing you didn't do. And their purpose of doing this is to, again, plant in a very covert way this belief that nothing you do is enough. And you will find yourself doing more and more and more. And then they couple this with taking one step back. So maybe there are 10 things normally on your list of things to do. And there are, let's say, every relationship, talking about a romantic relationship now, every relationship goes in as a team, right? So there's 10 things on your list of things to do. There are 10 things on the other person's list of things to do. And suddenly you suddenly have 11 things and they have 9. And when you do the thing that's on their list of things to do, they will give you the praise or even just acknowledgement that you exist, or something positive. And you start thinking, oh, when I do that, then, they see my value. And what can happen is over time, their 9 things becomes 8 things, becomes 5 things, becomes 2 things. Before you know it, you're taking on everything and they're doing nothing. And you may not even realize it, because especially if you've been thirsty for emotional connection, and if they are training you that the only time they give it is when you are taking on more and more and more, then you may not even realize just how burdened you've become and how little they are actually doing. And the third way is when they hit below the belt and they use your beliefs that were maybe from the past. They use that against you. So for example, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody and you came from a dysfunctional childhood. So you probably shared that with your significant other, especially if you didn't realize that you were now kind of in a very similar dynamic, right? So you shared your wounds with this person. Maybe you told them, I lived with parents that nothing I ever did was enough. They never made me feel like I was valuable. Nothing I did pleased them, and they always made me feel like I was less than. And now this person, this covert narcissist who you're in a relationship with, wants to exploit you. And you're not doing enough, which means you're still caring about yourself. Okay. In a relationship with a covert narcissist, their whole goal is for you to revolve around them 24/7 and to not have any, needs or wants for yourself. Okay. So if you start caring about yourself and showing it in some way, they might say something like, wow, maybe I can understand why your mom said you didn't do enough, because I feel that way too. Like you're putting so much attention in that and you're not giving anything to me. And they always use phrases like anything, everything, always, or never, because they are black and white thinkers. And because your desire is to make them happy, you might try harder and harder to prove to them above and beyond that, you do enough, and you're doing more and more, and they're refusing to see it. They're like playing as if they're blind. They can't see it, not because they can't, but because they know that by pretending they can't, it's going to make you try harder and harder and harder. Again, this is all a way to get you to give more, to be taken advantage of, and to be controlled. Okay, so if those sound familiar, I hope you can now at least see them, and now you're aware of when they could be happening in your life. But let's move on for those that maybe are in certain dynamics and they want to break out of them. And guess what? This is important, even if these dynamics were from the past. This information is important because if you don't work through the reasons why you wound up getting exploited, then you can run the risk of being in another relationship in the future, whether it's a significant other or a work relationship, and find yourself exploited again. We then have to go in and kind of figure out what were the wounds that allowed that in the first place. And it's painful to look at. It's more painful to look at this information than it is to look at the narcissist and the information about them. But it's also the information that will help you to break out of patterns that keep you unhappy in relationships. Okay, so the first thing that it's important to understand is learning how to have boundaries. A lot of people that wind up in relationships with covert narcissists were raised in an environment maybe where there was enmeshment, where there was no clear line between where your parents ended and where you began, or where their emotions or the responsibility for their emotions ended and where your responsibility for feelings and emotions began. And so when we don't have those clear boundaries, it's easy to fall for the tactics and the manipulation of a covert narcissist because you don't have that clarity. And sadly, they take advantage of that. By the way, in the month of April in the Thriver School of Transformation, that's our topic for the month is boundaries. Not only learning what they are, how people cross them, but also learning how to not only have them, but to enforce them as well. Okay, so if you want to join us even for that month, make sure you check out the School of Transformation. Something else that's valuable to make sure that you don't get exploited by anybody is learning how to validate yourself. When we know how to validate ourselves, we know how to see our own worth, even if somebody else doesn't see it. Again, not being able to validate self comes from not being validated in childhood. So if you have, if it's difficult for you, rather than being mad or upset about it, have compassion that when you needed it most, somebody didn't give it to you. But now you have an opportunity to learn how to validate yourself. And when you learn how to validate yourself, it's not just like this technical verbal thing that you do. It's not just like, oh, I see, I did that. I did this. I am this. No, it's really being able to not only see it, acknowledge it with your conscious, logical mind, but it's also about being able to feel the feelings that come with feeling valuable, feeling worthy, feeling enough. In other words, it's not something external. Being able to validate ourselves comes from beliefs. We're able to do it when we believe, I am worthy. I am enough just the way I am. I do a lot. I contribute a lot. I deserve to receive as well. The reason this is valuable is because those beliefs are like an anchor, especially around a covert narcissist. The covert narcissist wants you to think that you are less than and that you need them to see your value in order for you to feel valuable. Now they are controlling you 100% because you can't even see your own value unless they give you that stamp of approval. But when you strengthen the belief in your own eyes, then when somebody is trying to chip away at your self-esteem, you can resource from within. Okay, and that's like the anchor, and there's a storm. The storm of their lack of validation comes, but you're anchored in who you really are. Those are 2 tips that can really help you to break out of patterns. And if you struggle, if you learn this and you're like, yes, I know, but how come I can't put it into practice? If you're struggling with learning how to put it into practice, join us in the Thriver School of Transformation. It's an interactive community where we shine the light on the areas where you're having trouble putting it into practice. So join us, and remember that you get the first 7 days for free.